In Tibetan language, Ranzan means freedom and Chitup means kitchen. 54-year-old Bingma Chiring and his family have been running this budget canteen by the Yamuna Bank in Delhi for more than a decade now. Chiring, who retired from an Indian paramilitary force in 1991, says since then he has devoted his life to the cause of his motherland, Tibet. But every day between the breakfast and lunch rush, he waits for a call from his 24-year-old younger son. Till mid-February, young Tashi Chiring had been posted in the Galwan Valley as part of the Vikas Regiment of the Special Frontier Force, SFF.
I was very enthused. Friends were all talking about joining army. I finished my 8th standard and then joined the army. I followed in my father's footsteps. I thought I will get the opportunity to wield a rifle and fight China. But I was never posted near China border. My posting was always at Pakistan border.
China के साथ लड़ने को मिलेगा सोच के ना, मगर वहाँ तो चाइना के साथ तो चाइना के पास तो रखा नहीं, हम लोग तो पाकिस्तान के बॉर्डर में रखा जाता था.
Mingma Chiring's father too had been a part of the same Vikas regiment before him. His family is one of the first settlers in the national capital's Tibetan colony in New Arunanagar, more popularly known as Majnu Ka Tila.
पापा पहले हमारे चुशी खंडू में था, जो चुशी खंडू जो दलाई लामा जो वो तिब्बत से इंडिया तक वापस ले गया था.
My father initially was part of the Tibetan army that came with His Holiness to India. After coming to India, he joined Indian Army. He fought in the Bangladesh Liberation War. There he suffered injuries to his eyes and was discharged from army.
Things changed in the summer of 2020. More than 1,000 kilometers from Delhi in the Galwan Valley region of Ladakh, India and China locked horns along the line of actual control. The standoff continued for months, and 53-year-old Nima Tenzin was the first casualty on the Indian side. Nima died near the south bank of Pangong Tso in a skirmish in August 2020. He was a Tibetan refugee in exile in India, and he had taken up arms against China when he volunteered for the secretive SFF. Like Tenzin, Mingma Chiring's family and many other Tibetans in exile in India have been part of the secret force that came into being in 1962, right after the Sino-Indian War. But it took India nearly 6 decades before it finally acknowledged the contribution of this community in exile as part of the Special Force Vikas Regiment. Yeshe Tenzin's 24-year-old son, Tenzin Londen, was also out at the front line on 30th of August 2020, along with Nima Tenzin. He was injured in the landmine blast that night that took Nima Tenzin's life.
अभी हमारा बेटा तेंजिन लोंदेन जो चुशूल में था, डिप्लॉय में था अभी 3 महीना से पहले.
My son, Tenzin Londen, was posted at Chushul. On 30th August, they went for patrolling to Blacktop.
उस टाइम जो माइन ब्लास्ट हो गया, जो ब्लैक टॉप की जहाँ चाइना पोस्ट की.
The mine blast that happened there that night, one Subedar died in it and my son was injured.
एक्सपायर हो गया और बेटा इंजरी हो गया.
Yeshe Tenzin too is a former SFF soldier. After serving the army for 22 years, he drives a taxi in Leh nowadays.
मैं आर्मी में सर्विस किया है 22 ईयर सर्विस किया है सर मैं
I
रहा
have
है
served in
शिमला
the
में
army
रहा
for
वेस्ट
22
बंगाल में
years.
रहा
I
सिक्किम
was
में रहा
posted at
लद्दाख
Shimla,
ग्लेशियर
West Bengal,
हर
Chushul
शिड्यूल
and
में
Pangong.
केरे ये हनले सर हर जगह में मैं रहा हूँ सर
You were posted at the LAC?
Yes, of course. But there was no such heightened tension in our times.
कोई तनाव नहीं हुआ
India's acknowledgement of the existence of SFF was a message aimed at China. It also brought Tibet back into the limelight.
This, I mean, all this border issue and the tension between India and China, is not a good thing. But as far as the Tibetans are concerned, I again was encouraged to see that because of this, there is a certain burst of interest and awareness of the existence of Tibetans in India and of the contribution that Tibetans are making, even in the field of, being members of the Indian military force, and the importance of Tibet as a buffer zone. I think that's most important. All this trouble happened because Tibet was occupied. Before Tibet was occupied, India had no issue with the Tibetans for centuries. So now that it's occupied by the Chinese, all these problems on the borders have been, happening as a result of this. And I think it's extremely important for Indians, not only political leaders, but even ordinary Indians to realize the importance of Tibet for the security of India. And really, apart from the military threat, just the fact that you have to spend thousands of crores manning the long border, such a terribly sort of unhappy situation, which I feel, could have been avoided if Tibet was never occupied by the Chinese.
In 1947, when the British left India, there was no clear line that demarcated the newly independent country and the territory of Tibet to the north. The border crisscrossed the Himalayas from Kashmir in the west and Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh in the east. And along this 3,488 kilometers can be found sown the seeds of contention between India and China.
And historically, India and Tibet had 3,488 long, kilometers. So there was not even a single land border between China and India. It was always between India and Tibet. So after Tibet was lost, Chinese troops moved into Tibet. Now, all over the border of India and the Five Fingers, including Bhutan and Nepal. And we should always remember, historically, we had only 75 Tibetan foot soldiers patrolling 3,488 kilometers long border. We had only 75. So that much of trust we had in India. Now you have thousands and thousands of Chinese soldiers. Not only they're at the border, they're intruding and they're occupying various places.
On 31st of March 1959, a young man dressed in peasant's clothing had crossed the Bumla from Tibet into Arunachal Pradesh and made his way to Tawang. 8 days before that, and 500 kilometers to the north, the People's Liberation Army had marched into his home in Lhasa. 2 months and 6 days short of his 25th birthday, the Dalai Lama of Tibet had not just entered India but also began his life in exile there.
The night we escaped, the funny thing was my mother and my sister, they were dressed up as men. That was the funny part. Then the rest, there's a lot of excitement going with the armed bodyguards, then also the Kambas from the once we crossed the river. And then now, if I look back, the situation was so tense, I don't think I can do it again. But during that particular period, I didn't feel a thing.
The younger brother of the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Chogyal, was 13 years old then. Today, more popularly known as the Gari Rinpoche, among the Tibetan community, he not only remembers the arduous journey across the border, he remembers the photographs that he took. Because he had his most prized possession with him, his camera.
Pictures, while we were traveling or when there is a group of people. But then all the picture that I took, the film was confiscated from me once we reached Mussoorie.
Confiscated by Indian authorities?
No. Tibetan officials.
So those pictures don't exist, or
Those pictures do exist, but I don't get the credit under the picture.
Need for individual credit didn't matter as thousands of Tibetans following his elder brother crossed the McMahon line that demarcated land between India and Tibet. His photographs became part of the meager archive of Tibetan community in exile.
I came out of Tibet 9 years before 1959, and I was very young, so I remember very little. But I have many friends who remember past Tibet, and in some ways, talking to them, makes me feel as if I have also been able to experience the Tibetan life before the Chinese invasion. But from my own personal point of view, I hardly remember anything because I was only 6 when I left Tibet.
85-year-old Gyatso's memory is hazy these days, slowed by age. But once he gets going, he can recount every detail of his days as a guerrilla soldier. He was once a Khampa soldier who fought the Chinese army that had come and occupied his land, Tibet.
1955 से पहले वहाँ पर लड़ाई किया ना देश में हमारा देश में खंबा में वो जो है वो तो पता नहीं कितना है मैं 20 साल था उसी टाइम पर कितना है
I fought in the battle there before 1959. I fought for Khamba. I was 20 years old then.
ऐसा कुछ होगा ऐसे था
It was in 1955, I think. We lost it.
हम लोग हार गया हम लोग
China was very strong. We were not prepared to match their strength. We were not well equipped either. I left Khamba after we lost the battle and went to Lhasa.
हथियार से वो नहीं कुछ नहीं कर सकता है फिर ऐसे ऐसे करके हम लोग हार गया फिर मैं जो है खंबा से जो है लहसा को तरह से आया
Sitting on the steps of his home in Angling village of Ladakh, he recounts how Chinese despised people from Khampa as it was the epicenter of the 1955 revolt. He left Tibet with one of his brothers and came to India in 1959. Gyatso could never get in touch with the rest of his family again. India became his home, and he was one of the first recruits of the Special Frontier Force in 1962. Generations of Tibetans, born and raised in exile in India, keep 3 promises to heart. To preserve their language, to nurture their culture, and never to forget their Tibetan heritage. 29-year-old Rixen Dorje is a PhD student at JNU. But like many others of his generation, his studies began at the Tibetan Children's Village School.
The main problem might be there are many of the Indian students who are from the various places like the UP or in the South Indian. They might think that we are from the China, and some people has wondering that we belong from Nepal or from the northeastern state. However, in these cases, I feel a little bit feeling so uncomfortable.
Rixen's friend Tenzin Kunga and his elder brother escaped to India in 2006.
I came from Tibet.
You came from Tibet?
When I was 13.
How old were you?
I was 13.
13. And which part of Tibet did you come from?
I'm in southern east. It's Kham.
You also from Kham region?
When I came to India, I was supposed to become a monk. And then my brother sent me to school to get some education like English and all that. So then I continued, and eventually I didn't become a monk. I didn't go to a monastery. That's how I ended up.
You know, in terms of welfare and what you call aid in terms of helping refugees settle and all that, that came actually fairly early, right from the time when His Holiness and the thousands of Tibetans came into exile in India. But you are very right. I feel that it was only much later than 70s that there was more awareness of the Tibetan tragedy, and this greater awareness came about, I think, with the start of His Holiness's visits to various countries in the world.
At the Tibetan handicrafts shop in Majnu Katila, Rixen listens to contemporary Tibetan songs like Pur. Pur or Fly is the rage amongst the younger generation of Tibetans. Ironically, inside Tibet, the exilees say there is no freedom to do anything, let alone fly. International watchdog Freedom House's latest report says Tibet is the second least free region in the world, despite China claiming to have vastly improved the living conditions in TAR.
वहाँ पे ना तो अपनी भाषा या जो पढ़ाई लिखाई है, जो अपनी क्या बोलते हैं एजुकेशन के ऊपर भी टिबेटन से ज़्यादा वो लोग चाइनीज़ पे प्रेशर करते हैं कि सीखने को.
People in Tibet now are forced to learn Chinese. The preference for education too is given in Chinese languages. Besides, all in my family, my grandparents died. My mother was left with very few choices. She was young. She escaped and came to India.
सारा पार करके इंडिया में सेटल हुआ है, ऐसा है.
Sonam was born and raised in Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh. The 30-year-old accountant, like many others, take an active part in the community's struggle to keep their identity and cause alive.
I have mixed feelings about that because in some ways I'm very impressed and I'm encouraged that even this younger generation of Tibetans who have not seen Tibet still seem to have this very, very strong feeling for the Tibetan issue. On the other hand, I think it's only natural now that they've been away from their country, away from their natural environment, they are being influenced. And I have great concern that, many of our Tibetan traditions, our language ability, way of life, they're all being, what should I say, contaminated, or, it's
Fading
not
away. Shall we say fading away?
definitely fading away, especially for those who are living in the Western countries. In India, it's a little better.
Yeshe Dawa is a former representative of the Tibetan parliament in exile. Today, he's a retired man. The 65-year-old rues the lack of freedom of the people in his native Tibet.
I mean, still our younger generations are, particularly, जो तिब्बत के अंदर 7 साल से जन्म उधर ही हुआ.
Those who are living in Tibet for past 60 years and were born and brought up there, they were all taught in Chinese schools. Yet, Tibetans who are protesting there today, the 150 or 60 people who have self-immolated, they all belong to the young generation. They were born and brought up under Chinese occupation, but they still couldn't be brainwashed and are standing against Chinese regime. This is a clear indication that Tibetans are not happy under China. Their human rights are violated. Those who live in Tibet now and those of us living in exile, we all hope to unite and return to our motherland, Tibet.
लोग हैं जो यंग जनरेशन है और जो तिब्बती यंग जनरेशन यहाँ पे है, सभी लोग हम यही राय देख रहा है कि हम एक दिन अपने देश में वापस आएंगे.
Tibetans continue to escape and at great risk of life and limb continue to cross the border even today. Both Tenzin Chugsum and her brother were born in India, where her parents found work as daily labor in road construction in Himachal Pradesh. Tenzin's elder siblings never made it to freedom, as her parents lost their infant children during the crossing.
I want to go to Tibet once in my life. If not in this life, maybe in the next life I will be born there. But I want to go there in this life before I die. But it's very difficult. We have no valid passport.
Tenzin and her daughter run a tea shop at Majnu Katila. People on their way around the colony find time to stop by and catch up with each other at her shop. Next to her shop, 81-year-old Chodan sits in the sun and recites his prayers.
What we did in exile is mostly symbolic, which is very important. With simple, our visions start to grow and then we might implement. But if you just look at its face value, I don't think there's not much of a significance. Then also one of the big great thing is we have opted for democracy. Democracy doesn't mean that you can behave however you'd like. You got to have discipline. And all over the world, democratic troubles stem from this, and we are not free from it.
As life passes by, Chodan keeps chanting, just like Mingma Chiring's octogenarian mother, Dolma. Today, Dolma is oblivious of the busy life that flows around her, but her face bears the marks of the struggle of her nation. To survive and make the best of a never-ending exile in a foreign land.